Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 609, and today's date is March 6th, 2015, and the title of this episode is, U.S. Government Tells Us We're in a Recovery, but Why Does It Feel Like an Economic Collapse? Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, out in Greece, we understand there's a new government there. They're trying to work for the people. They made an emergency loan deal with the Eurogroup. They've been talking to Russia, China, the BRICS, and they might, like they've suggested, they might have to go out and collect taxes. And it seems that the Greek government is getting ready to employ a large number of non-professional inspectors to go out and collect these taxes. Now, when the people see this, this might be a problem. People might look at this and say, wait a minute, what is going on here? He's supposed to be working for us. We're supposed to have no more austerity. We're supposed to be having no more debt. And it seems like things are going the opposite way. We do not have the money to pay for these taxes. And the whole purpose of electing you into government is not to have this done. And we can see from what this new government is doing, they're changing the terminology of the actual bailout terms. Like, for instance, instead of troika, they're going to use the word institution. Instead of liquidity, it's going to be cash flow. Instead of third bailout, it is now contract for recovery and growth of the Greek economy. Now, you can call it whatever you want. A bailout is a bailout as a bailout. It doesn't matter what name you put on it. And when the Greek people see this, they might shift and move towards some type of civil war, or they might maneuver to throw this government out. And we can see from all their promises, they really have not kept any of them at this time. And we're going to have to continually watch this to see where this goes. Now, as we know, out throughout the Eurozone, many countries are having problems. I mean, they have a huge amount of debt. They have austerity. The Eurozone is continually throwing more and more debt on top of them. And we see out in Spain, at least 95 families were evicted every day in Spain in 2014 because they could not meet their mortgage payments. The number of foreclosures on all types of residence, homes, offices, farms, holiday homes, reached 119,000 last year, almost 10% higher than in 2013. And this year doesn't look any better. Foreclosure procedures on main residents rose to 34,680 families in 2014, an increase of 7.4% over the previous year. So we can see right now the entire Eurozone is collapsing. We see it in Cyprus. We see it in Greece. We see it in Italy. We see it in Spain, Portugal, France. It's spreading up to the UK, to Germany. I mean, is every country as bad off as Greece? No, but we can see that it is spreading, and it is getting worse. Why do you think they're creating money right now? They're trying to slow the collapse down. And you know when they create money, it doesn't help the people whatsoever. It helps themselves. And when I say themselves, it's the central bankers. Now, here in the United States, we've had fantastic news. The unemployment has dropped to 5.5%. We were previously at 5.7. It came down 0.2%. Everyone is working today. Everybody has a job. Or do they? Because we have to remember what this government does, what these central bankers do. They manipulate all the numbers. I mean, the unemployment rate came in lower than expected, as we see. And, of course, everyone was expecting it to go down to 5.6%, but it went all the way down to 5.5%. And as a result, the participation rate dropping again from 62.9% to 62.8%. But the number everyone was looking at this month, the change in average hourly earnings, came in at 0.1%, once again missing expectations of 0.2% and sliding from 0.5%. So does that mean that everyone's finding these fantastic, high-quality, high-paying jobs? No, everyone is not. U.S. Labor Secretary Thomas Perez said the quality of jobs is going up. No, they're not. The quality of jobs, it is getting worse. And if we take at least 2 minutes and we look at the BLS report, we see leisure and hospitality added 66,000 jobs. Education and health added 54,000 jobs. Retail added 32,000 jobs. That's 152,000 jobs, more than half of the total February job gains. They also represent the lowest paid jobs in the United States. So guess what? We are not seeing a recovery. All we are doing is replacing those high-paying quality jobs with low-paying part-time jobs. And those people who are continually looking for their high-paying job, who have not been on an interview in 4 weeks, but they're continually sending resumes out, guess what? They are considered fallen off. They're no longer looking. They don't want to support their family. They don't want to bring food into their home. They don't want to pay for their rent or mortgage. They don't want to go on vacation. They don't want to buy products. They don't want to pay for their car. That's what they're trying to tell us. And we know, no, this is not true. I mean, if we look at this, we see that right now, the reason why unemployment dropped from 5.7 to 5.5 is that the number of unemployed Americans dropped by 274,000, while those employed rose by 96,000. While the people not in the labor force rose by 354,000 in February, rising to a record 92.8 million. People who currently want a job rose to 6.5 million, matching the all-time high number of Americans not in the labor force. The end result, the labor force participation rate dropped once more, declining to only 62.8%. And this is the lowest since 1978. Again, we are not in recovery. Now, if we take a look and we try to understand what's going on here, we see that retail stores since the beginning of this year, we see a lot of them have gone bankrupt and a lot of them closed. A lot of people have been laid off. I mean, Staples is continually closing stores. Lowe's went out of business. A lot of the main clothing stores, they've went out of business. And from the beginning of this year, and if we stretch back all the way into 2014, we have had a lot of store closings. I mean, Target just announced in this incredible recovery, they're going to be laying off thousands of people. Canada, Target closed all of their stores, got rid of 17,000 people. Radio Shack's closing stores. JCPenney is closing stores. Wet Seal closing stores, shutting down. Sbarro last year closed their pizza restaurants. And on and on and on. It's not getting better. As soon as the Christmas holiday season was over, Macy's announced they're closing 14 of their stores. In a recovery, and how everything is getting better, we would see the opposite. Actually, going all the way back to 2010, when the unemployment rate was, 10% around that time? Compared to this holiday season, when it was at 5.7? Why was the holiday season so bad? If it's almost half. Think about it. The unemployment rate is almost half, and the holiday season is one of the worst we've ever seen, and stores are closing left and right. It makes no sense. And again, when we look at what the U.S. government central bankers do, they leave out things, and we mentioned this yesterday. Challenger gave out a report saying, the oil, the gas industry, they laid off thousands upon thousands of people, but guess what? The BLS completely ignored it, and they didn't count for it whatsoever. They just didn't want to do it. And this is how they're keeping their numbers, their manipulated numbers, the way they are. I mean, Staples is reporting that sales are falling for the 8th straight quarter. Of course, this is blamed on the internet or the weather or the sun rising in the morning and setting in the evening. I mean, they just make up all these different excuses. Except the main one, the economy is not doing well. SAP International is laying off 2,200 people worldwide. We know RBS is laying off 14,000. I mean, we're having huge number of people laid off every single day. The economy is completely falling apart. And this is why they're creating all these programs to drag as many people as it possibly can into purchased cars. If you notice, it's not really purchasing. It's taking out loans, because this is what the central bankers need. They need to spread the debt. It's their product. So they need people to come in to take out student loans. They need people to come in and take out auto loans. They need people to come out and take out real estate loans, mortgages. They don't want people paying in cash. They want you to take out a loan. This is why they create these programs, to drag more and more people into this. They did this back in 2007, 2008. What happened to those people? They went bankrupt. They had foreclosures. They lost everything. Who got it all? The Fed. It went all onto their balance sheet. They took it all. The central bankers took the real assets. This is what they do. We see the U.S. trade deficit worse than expected again. This is the second month in a row of worse than expected deficits and fourth of last 5. The shift is led by big drops in food and beverages, down negative 9.1%, and the auto industry, down negative 7% on the exports. But don't worry. The Fed just finished their stress test for 2015. 31 out of 31 have passed. There are no problems in the banks. They will survive the next collapse. Of course they will. Because what they've done is they put everything in place for bail-ins. Every single bank now has the ability to flip a switch, lock down the accounts, and take the money from everyone's account. They're not ready to stay afloat on their own. They're ready to take your money. That's what they're ready for. That's what this whole entire stress test was about. It was about the bail-ins to get your money. And everyone has succeeded now. All systems are in place. And we understand that the United States government is trying to pass the TPP. And of course, it's secretive. Congress can't even read it. And you know, when something is very secretive, that means it's not good for the American people. It's good for who? The corporations, the U.S. government, the central bankers. And the TPP basically is designed to hand over control of the world's governments to private corporation interest. And it is all being done in secret. Even Congress, like I said, cannot read this document. Congress should be up in arms saying, we're not doing anything with this. We're not even going to look at it. But again, most likely it will come across their desk. They won't read it and pass it. They did it with the Affordable Care Act, the NDAA, the Patriot Act, you name it. Congress is not working for the people whatsoever. The TPP will eliminate all nation states as the ruling authority, and it will be supplanted by corporate authority. This will be made possible because of an obscure provision of the TPP known as the Investor State Dispute Settlement. Basically what they're going to have is corporations going to a private court system outside of the United States. They will make the rulings. Under the ISDS, the dispute panel may only consider the free trade values of the case. No other factors may be considered when deciding the case. This means that these corporate panels must disregard values of public health, civil liberties, environmental protection, or the rights of the workers, like working conditions, or any other constitutional protected liberties, because they're dealing with something outside of the U.S. This is not for the people whatsoever. And we're getting drips and drabs of what's in the TPP from leaks. But we're probably not even getting the meat of it because it's all kept secret. Japan right now, they are paying their debt with 43% of the tax revenue. Like I said, every single country who continually piles on the debt, their revenue goes to their interest payments. This is why the interest rates are staying at zero and actually going to negative. Because if they tick up, the entire system collapses right now. And these countries are finding it harder and harder to find revenue. This is why they're creating all these laws, trying to tax pretty much everything, because they're trying to bring in as much as they possibly can, because the debt is becoming unsustainable. They cannot sustain what's happening. Look at Greece. Look at Cyprus. Look at France. Look at Spain. Look at the US. Look at Japan. It's all crumbling around them. And they know this. And this is why they're trying to provoke war all across the world. And we see that they are continually provoking Russia by implementing sanctions, extending them for another year. And right now, the U.S. has frozen accounts of Russian banks. And they have frozen about $640 million as part of America's escalating sanctions war against Russia over its policies in Ukraine. You mean the United States had a coup d'etat in there. They tried to take over a country with regime change. The people fought back. They didn't want this to happen. Crimea voted itself away. And the southeastern people said, we don't want to be part of this regime. And we are going to fight for our freedom. Actually, this is what the United States was saying that the people were doing when they were having the coup d'etat, and they supported that. But of course, now it's the other way. They won't support this because they're the terrorists. And we can see that Russia has proposed two peace plans, Minsk I and Minsk II. And what has the United States done? Nothing. What has the UK done? Nothing. What has Europe done? Nothing. All they're doing is pushing war. Now, Putin decided to slash 10% of his own salary, and he signed a decree that reduces the salaries of the President, Prime Minister, Prosecutor General, head of the Investigative Committee. The salary cut will be effective till the end of the year, and they're doing this because of what's going on in Russia. They're basically showing the people that, yes, we will take a pay cut. Wait, didn't Congress and our government increase their salaries? Or they said, we're going to keep our salaries, but we're not going to give us raises this year. They didn't really slash it. Or there are senators out there saying that we should actually get more money. We're not paid enough. Well, it works it's the opposite here. While everyone is out on the streets looking for a job, retail is completely crumbling apart. Real estate is imploding. Unemployment is reaching 30%. Our government people are playing golf on their private golf course, eating at their private restaurants, taking limos, taking private jets, living the life like kings and queens in government. Now, we understand the government powers, the central bankers, would love to shut down the internet. And we can see that they're trying to push their agenda on internet companies like social media. They want social media to start monitoring certain keywords and reporting them to the government. So if they see something out there and it's repeated more than once, there is a pattern, and these people need to be reported so the government can get a warrant to go ahead and look into the situation. But people use terms all the time. And we can see right now, Prime Minister David Cameron has expressed an interest in banning social media networks which provide an encrypted message services. Again, governments do not want your information encrypted. This way they can't read it. And they say, this is what terrorists use. Social media is actually helping the terrorists. Well, I just want to say, if you're a true terrorist or a criminal, you don't go out there and put your information on social media. You do it through all the back channels where the government can't find it. Don't take out a newspaper ad and say, yes, we're going to strike at this point. No, you use an encrypted message if you're going to do it in a newspaper ad so nobody picks up on it. But again, a real terrorist, a real criminal, is not going to be doing this on social media. They're not going to use their cell phones out in the open without encryption. It makes no sense whatsoever. What they're doing is they don't want the people, everyday people, to use encryption, because this way, if they do use it, they can't figure out what's going on. And this is your personal correspondence with someone else, and there's no reason for the government to look at it. Because if this is the case and nobody cares, then let them come into your house, look through your safe, let them look through your safety deposit box, let them look through your personal files if you don't mind, because it's the same exact thing. Now, out in Ukraine, everything is still falling apart. The economy is just reeling. Ukraine's industrial output declined by 21% in January. Ukraine lost 20% of economy due to the war that is going on here and the destruction of a lot of the factories in Ukraine. Ukraine has lost 20% of its economic potential over the past year. Ukraine has also had to build its army and fund its army to fight their own people. Think about this for a second. They're spending all of this money. Actually, it's not even their money. It's being loaned to them by the U.S. government, the IMF, the EU, where all the people are responsible for paying this. And they're funding the army to fight their own people who don't want to be part of the puppet government. Because again, they are terrorists. Now we see Kiev has violated the ceasefire deal once again. They fired on Donetsk airport. And this time, the representatives of the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE, have confirmed that the mission's observers came under shelling at the Donetsk airport from an area controlled by Ukrainian military. It just so happened that the OSCE was in this area when the firing occurred, and they tracked it down, and it did come from Ukraine. So this time they were actually there at the moment that this was happening. And yes, Kiev is continually trying to provoke the southeastern people. And we know the Kiev authorities are dragging their feet on the issue to start a political process. They're stalling because they're building up their forces. They're getting ready for a major offensive. And they're going to continually stall. They're not ready to have talks because their agenda is completely opposite of the Minsk agreement. Well, Moscow, Paris, and Berlin, they want more OSCE observers in East Ukraine. They're getting together, they're meeting again, saying, yes, we need more of the observers in there to keep track of what is going on, to maintain peace. And we'll have to see if more OSCE observers come into Ukraine. Now, there was a strange message from the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry. The statement published on the ministry website on Thursday states that the Foreign Ministry recommends that Ukrainian citizens planning trips to the Russian Federation assess the risks and dangers and carefully weigh the need for such travel. The statement notes that the cases of unjustified detention of citizens of Ukraine and a lack of humane treatment toward Ukrainians by Russian law enforcement agencies have become the norm. It adds that this humane treatment includes behavior incomparable with human dignity, including use of unacceptable methods of physical and psychological pressure, including torture, on Ukrainians. Now, this is pure propaganda because we have to remember what's going on. Since Ukraine has started this offensive against the people in the southeastern region, and they've declared that these people are terrorists, a lot of Ukrainians have fled to Russia. Almost 1 million people have now moved out of Ukraine into Russia. And they don't want more people to leave because you have to remember, they're drafting these people. And if more and more people leave the country because of this, they're going to lose those people they need to draft. They won't be able to get them, so they have to come up with some type of propaganda to convince people to stay in Ukraine. But why do people at this point would want to stay in there? Their economy is falling apart. And if you do stay, you're going to be drafted into the armed forces, and most of the people, They don't want to do this. They don't want to go into the armed forces. Poroshenko is out there, and he is saying that he's setting up a constitutional commission, but Moscow questions in what he's saying here, because they want to know what kind of commission this is going to be, how will it work, and how is this going to work with the southeastern people, and Poroshenko has not answered whatsoever. And under the Minsk agreement, there should be no foreign troops inside Ukraine, but the United States is bringing more and more troops in there. Of course, they're trainers, they're advisors, basically combat-ready Marines. And we see that there are 300 U.S. servicemen going to Ukraine's western Lviv region to train Ukrainian soldiers. And Washington is going to allocate about $1 billion for such purposes. And it's very odd, and it makes no sense if they're looking to implement the Minsk agreement, because right now we have Ukraine bringing new tanks in or refurbishing old tanks and bringing them up to the contact line. We have Ukraine out there looking for weapons. The United States right now is debating if they should send lethal weapons. They're doing it covertly. Troops are being sent into Ukraine by the UK, by the United States, by Poland, by Spain. And we see UK right now, they're sending non-lethal equipment worth about $1.3 million. And this is going to include helmets, helmet-mounted monocular night vision goggles, global positioning units, hardened laptops, and first aid kits, and it will be delivered to Ukraine shortly. So they're getting all the equipment coming in, getting ready for a major offensive. And we know for a fact that something is up, because David Cameron is out there screaming and yelling that if Putin misbehaves, there will be more sanctions, and we will be taking things to a whole new level if Putin ups the aggression. Ups the aggression? He just put forth a peace deal, a ceasefire deal, which the UK, the US were not even involved in. They didn't even present a peace deal. Actually, they're bringing in trainers, advisors, combat-ready Marines, equipment, giving more aid, getting ready for a major offensive. So we can see right now from their propaganda message, they're getting ready to blame the next event on Russia to show that this is why we need to go attack the southeastern people and Russia. And again, we have to remember, Poroshenko is not doing what he says. And if he is assassinated, they're going to try to set this up to make it look like it came from the southeastern region or from Russia. Or there could be something else. Maybe there's a nuke. Maybe there's something else, but they're getting ready to do it. And we're going to have to watch that very, very carefully. Even the State Department official said Wednesday that the U.S. considers what Russia is doing, it's an invasion of Ukraine. Just look at our black and white blurry satellite photos that show absolutely nothing. You can see by this blotch that these are 500 tanks. And this other blotch, these are soldiers. They have no proof. They're just out there making propaganda and making everything up to convince everyone we need to go to war. This is what they're doing. And this is during the ceasefire talks. Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, Victoria Nuland, you know that phone call where they were setting up the coup d'etat. They spent $5 billion. They already had Yatsenyuk picked out. Said, yeah, this is an invasion by Russia. We have no proof. We can't show you any pictures. We can't show you any satellite images, but believe us, it's an invasion. And even the latest statements by the deputy head of NATO testify to the fact that the leaders of the bloc want to intervene in Russia's internal politics. Basically, they're dreaming of a Russian Maidan. They want regime change in Russia. This is why they killed Nemtsov. This was the first stage to see if they can rile the people up. Actually, it's the second. The first were the sanctions. thinking that it would hurt the people in Russia and they would rise up against Putin. Then they killed Nemtsov, and they thought, now we'll get the people all riled up. But again, it failed. Because, again, Putin, he worked for the KGB. If he was going to do this, he would have a patsy all ready to go. Why would he leave it open-ended? Why would he make it look like, I did this? He wouldn't. And if he was really going to knock him off, he wouldn't do it in this fashion. It would be a car accident, a heart attack, train crash, plane crash, anything that made it look like an accident. But again, we know the CIA, U.S. government, is trying to provoke Russia. Now, something very interesting. There was drills going on with the USS Theodore Roosevelt and the French. And there was a French submarine. And they figured out a major vulnerability that allowed the French submarine to sink the aircraft carrier, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, and most of its escort during drills. And it was revealed by the French Navy and Defense Ministry in blog posts that were quickly wiped out. Both the French Defense Ministry and the Navy released and then quickly deleted their post. The post was the SNA Sapphire in training with the U.S. Navy of the coast of Florida that praised the 34-year-old French nuclear submarine's success in sinking the American aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt along with the best part of its escort. During the last stage of the drill, the French sub snuck up undetected on U.S. Carrier Strike Group 12 by penetrating a U.S. defensive screen. And again, they wiped this clean. They don't want people to know that we have holes in our defenses, that our equipment is not doing what it should be doing. I mean, look at the F-35. It's a joke. The plane is a piece of junk, the most expensive piece of junk. And we see right now that we had way back when the U.S. ships were in the Black Sea, we had Russia fly over and knock out all of their systems. So again, the technology that the U.S. is using right now is not working the way it's supposed to. Or these countries are developing technology for a lot less and it works a lot better. We're not prepared to go into a war. And this is why eventually they will resort to nuclear weapons. Because they're prepared. They have underground bunkers. They'll just come out later on and start this system all over. The central bankers have no allegiance to a country. They don't care which country wins or loses, as long as they can set up a central bank and put everyone back into debt and steal the natural resources from every single country. Now, out in the Middle East, we see that things are completely falling apart. We see that the Libyan oil fields, a lot of them came under attack from the U.S. Islamic State proxy army. But what's really happening is the people are trying to take over these oil fields, and the U.S. government central bankers do not want this oil sold not using the dollar. And they will stop it any way they possibly can. And we see that Libya is joining up with Egypt, and now Libya is joining up with Jordan. They're putting together a coalition force to go into Libya. This is all being planned, and this is why we see them putting everything together and getting ready to do this. Now, it came out that the Islamic State is using drug money to support themselves. And we have to remember they're getting this from Afghanistan, because they told us that Islamic State is now in Afghanistan. And they're using the poppies to create heroin. And they're selling this drug all over the world to pay for their terror organization. Now again, we have to remember that the U.S. government uses the poppy fields to create opium, heroin. They sell it overseas to pay for their covert operations. And we see that they place the Islamic State in Afghanistan to show that, yes, this is how they're paying for everything. But again, this is a proxy army. And again, they can't get the money from the U.S. government because that would be detected, so they have to use funds from other sources. And this is how they pay for their proxy armies. And again, more troops will be heading to Afghanistan. The Islamic State is maneuvering in each one of these countries throughout the Middle East because they are where the U.S. needs to go and where the U.S. wants to go. Now, out in Syria, as we know, the U.S. is going to make an attempt and try to get into Syria. And they're using a lot of propaganda like Syria has been using chlorine weapons. They brought in Caesar to show all these pictures of torture. Of course, this was in a hospital. There was no proof. It's just the after effects. We don't know who tortured. Or are these people just hurt from the war? There's no proof of anything. But they were plastering them all over the place. And they're trying to pin Assad on using chlorine weapons. Well, the United Nations Security Council on Friday passed a resolution on inadmissibility of the use of chlorine and other poisonous substances in combat operations in Syria. The document provides for possible introduction of measures under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter in case such incidents reoccur. The resolution was supported by 14 countries, including Russia. The new draft resolution condemns in the strongest terms any use of any toxic chemical such as chlorine. So what we can see right now is we know that Assad has not used the chlorine weapons. This actually came from the Free Syrian Army. And we understand that the Free Syrian Army, which is controlled by the United States government, central bankers, have used other chemical weapons like sarin gas back in 2013 and many other times. Of course, they try to pin it on Assad right now. So the next time someone uses chlorine gas inside the country, it will be against this United Nations Security Council resolution. But again, we have to remember, if the Islamic State uses it, who cares? They're considered a terror organization, and this is why the United States government central bankers are dropping the Free Syrian Army and having everyone defect over to them, because then they cannot be held accountable. And we can see right now, everything is getting prepared and getting ready to strike into Iraq, into Libya, into Lebanon, into Yemen, and then eventually into Syria, and then eventually into Iran. And we have to remember, Iran has a treaty with Syria. Syria has a treaty with Russia. Iran has a treaty with China and Russia. And when this thing goes hot, these other countries will get involved, and we will have World War III. And you can see from everything that's been going on, this is what they've been setting up for. This is what they've been preparing for. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.